Welcome to another episode of Digging Deeper. My name's Bobby. I'm here with Jeremy, and roles have been reversed this week.
Yes, they have. I'm in charge.
You're in charge, and I get to ask all the questions.
Sure.
This past weekend, Jeremy preached his first official message as the executive pastor here at Rise, and did you hear that?
Yes.
And he incredible message. Shared a little bit of your story. It was a good day yesterday.
I enjoyed it. It was fun. I hope everyone else did. You get up there like, what are you supposed to? You're like, it was an incredible day. Well, you're right.
I had multiple people tell me how great they thought it was. Cool. I don't know if you saw my Instagram post or not, because I did.
I shared it.
Did you reshare it? I couldn't remember if you reshared it.
I did.
But I posted a photo of Jeremy preaching, and it was like a good photo. Like it looked like you really knew what you were like doing.
I was in it.
And then I just put a little tiny photo down at the bottom left-hand corner of what all my other photos look like, and it was you making the worst faces.
Oh, I didn't see that part.
You didn't even notice it?
I didn't notice the small part. That's funny.
Yeah. So there's a little photo on the bottom left, and it's like most of my photos. So I put that out into the world of Instagram, Facebook.
Fun fact: I just recently was here at Rise. We have a photo shared album for when the team is taking pictures for whatever we use it for, and I just got added to it. I was going through it from yesterday. Why? Of course, I'm going through it yesterday.
Why would you be looking at it yesterday?
And I was going through it. I'm like, I am not photogenic. My face does weird things. I realized I'm like, nobody can capture my face at a good moment, which means maybe there's not a good moment that it ever has.
No, I had one good moment.
You did. You caught it. By the way, the team did not. They did not catch it. I was looking at all of them.
That's all right.
It's okay.
But when I posted that, I had like 3 or 4 different people message me and said, like a proud papa.
That's so weird. I'm older than you.
I know. Your wife, Lindsay, was one of them, by the way.
That's awesome.
But multiple people.
That's awesome.
And then I don't know if you saw the graphic in the background. It was 2 Kings, so those are crown.
Did you see the one where it's
perfect?
Yes,
there was one where it looked like you were wearing the crown.
Yeah, I sent that one to my small group, and I said, take note, the king has arrived. They were like, no.
And they all ignored you.
They did, for the most part. Yep.
Well, it was a great message, and obviously you shared a little bit of this. It was part of your story. Yeah. You've shared your story before, but this was a new perspective.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. I know you posted online that you were preaching, and there were multiple people, like I don't know how many, but just tons of people that were commenting on your post that you were about to preach, how excited they were for you, like people that have known you for a long time.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but you're basically 15 years from the last ministry job you had, which means you were 15
younger.
years.
I was younger.
You were younger. You were almost in your 20s.
You know what? Now that I do the math, hold on. So I'm 47 minus 15. So I was 32.
When was the last time you preached to adults? Not youth. You've preached for youth and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, probably was 2000. I promise it's in the teens. 2000. Well, I've spoken, so I want to be honest about it. It's not like, let's not go back and say it was 1993 or whatever. I've spoken to adults probably, but 2012 would be 2011, 2012 would have been the last time I spoke to adults.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. You were like,
I was out of practice.
You were almost in your 20s the last time you spoke to adults.
Probably 33, 33, 32, 33.
Man, well, you would have never known.
Well, thank you.
You would have never known.
Thank you.
You shared some stories. Obviously, you shared a few cop stories. I didn't know how many cop stories you were going to get into.
I didn't want to share a lot.
But when you started off the 4th of July story with, I got to tell you all a crazy story, right after telling everyone you were a cop, I was like, I don't know that we want to hear this story.
Nope. And there was one from 4th of July that I did not share.
But then, you shared a little bit of family and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then you jumped into your story. Obviously, your story is weighty.
Yes.
And I mean, I know if you're listening to the podcast, you've probably already listened to the message, but your story's weighty, and you're very vulnerable in that moment. But you shared that like your perspective has changed of your story 4.5 years ago was your exact timeline.
Yeah.
What was it like? I don't know how many times you've shared your story since the last time you preached. What was it like sharing that story again, but then also sharing that story again from a new perspective that maybe you hadn't seen before?
Yeah, it was, well, first, let's talk to the 4.5 years ago, because I had a number of people go, hey, hey, you didn't tell us what the 4.5 year thing was. And I said, hey, it's called a cliffhanger. Like, we'll get back to it.
By the way, you made a joke yesterday that you'll get to tell the second half in 2 years.
Yes.
And then Jeffrey Cox comes to me after service. He's like, hey, will you let him preach again before 2 year mark? And I'm like, guys, he was joking. He doesn't. He's going to preach again in 2 months, not 2 years.
I know. It was wishful thinking on my part. So, but, and I will talk down the road. We'll talk about what that shift was. I think for me, it was actually very freeing. So something I left out of my message that I had written it in my notes, but I didn't share it, was part of how I chose to handle getting sick. Because of my own skewed beliefs and my own inner voice at the time. At 16, do you really think inner voice? You're not thinking that way, especially back then before everybody was therapized for everything. I took it on that it was my role to make the weight of this lighter for everyone around me. Mm-hmm. And so it was freeing, to be honest. I think the biggest shift was to be honest that it was not a good thing. And so often in my life, and I think a lot of us do this with a lot of things, we are so desperate to find the purpose in painful moments that we try to skip over the pain. Mm-hmm. This is horrible. This was this, but, and someone even say, but God, which is true, but God, but that doesn't negate how painful the experience was. So I think that was freeing to be able to go, God did amazing things, and this was one of the worst things that I ever experienced I don't think I've ever said that cancer stole a part of my youth. That was probably the first time I'd ever vocalized that.
Wow.
And that was freeing to be able to do that.
Yeah, I don't think you have to minimize the reality of the experience to prove that God is good. There's a Johnny Swim song that talks about, I want to love you till it's painful or till it hurts. I can't remember the exact word, but the premise is like, hey, if the good story of God, yes, it came from a painful moment. If you act like, well, it was whatever, it was all good, then the testimony is the fact that it was bad.
Yes. And God was with me through it all.
And God stayed with you, and then there's a beauty of the story that's brought you on the other side. And you were pretty transparent about that. That's not, I think you said, tied up in a neat little bow at the end.
Right.
And your story has
worked out, but it worked out great.
Yeah, but that's not the reality for everyone's story. No. The testimony or the faith matter is that Christ is with you in the highest of highs and the lowest of lows.
Yes.
And I love that you were able to be able to vocalize that and verbalize that and even feel that. Did you feel that when you were 16, or was that perspective?
Did I feel
did you you're in the middle of it? And I know you shared and you opened up Naaman, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But did you, when you were in the middle of it, were you like, I know I can feel God's with me in it? Or was it like perspective? Years down the road, you look back and you're like, oh, I could see where God was with me.
Oh, I think both.
Okay.
So I think in it, well, I remember a moment where I shared how I pulled a prank on someone, one of my nurses, but then I got to share Jesus with her. Mm-hmm. Her name was Mary. She was my, what is it called? CAT scan. Okay. And so I'd have a lot of CAT scans, and Mary was my CAT scan nurse, and she was always the same. She was just always there. And I had done this dumb prank because I was the youngest kid in that hospital. And when I say I was the youngest kid, I mean, I was the only teenager in that hospital, and really great hospital, no kids. And so I just did things that they weren't used to. So with Mary, she was trying to help me on the bed, and I told her, I'm like, you don't have to help me on the bed. I'm 16. I'm fine. Mm-hmm. I can get on the bed. And she goes, no, it's part of our policy. I'm like, Mary, you know me. I can do this. So she's like, okay. So when I got on the bed, I rolled off and acted like it fell because I thought that was funny. It was not funny to Mary. And then after it was all said and done, she came out and said, hey, you're acting really great in all this, but we have people that can talk to you because this is really serious what you're going through. And I said, are you trying to get me to go see a shrink? Those were my words back then.
Sure.
And she said, well, you need someone. And in that moment, I was and I believed this and felt it. I said, Mary, the truth is, I got people praying for me. so I know I'm not alone. And secondly, when I get the most scared, it's usually in the middle of the night, and I always have God. He's always with me to talk to me. And so in that season of my life, during that whole thing, from the moment I read that story of Naaman, I really do believe that was God giving a 16-year-old grace at a really dumb challenge that I made to him, if you listen to the message. But I did know, like I sensed and knew God is with me. I am not alone. He may not do it the way I want, but he's with me. And with perspective, I look back and I can see all the ways that he was with me, not just in the really public things that people saw that happened, but in those quiet moments, little things, little hints of his presence throughout all of it. So I think both is true.
Let's go back just a little bit from that moment, because you specifically mentioned the fact that you were angry at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Like you had grew up in church. You knew I love the way you said it. And I don't know, I'm assuming everybody picked up on it, but maybe they didn't. But I love the way you spoke about the fact, like, I knew all the right things to say, all the right times to do the right things, the expectation. I did church well, that's the way you said it. And you're obviously being, you weren't saying there's a right way to do church. You were saying that you knew the right motions to make everyone see that you knew what you were doing. But the point is you grew up in church, understanding who God was, certain level of expectation. You grew up in a more charismatic setting.
For sure.
Definitely believing in healing and miracles and all this. And now you're 16 and you're hit with a cancer diagnosis. And you're a little bit angry, or a lot angry. I don't want to put words in your mouth. But you didn't walk away, even when the thing you would say you would hope for didn't transpire, even in the face of really bad news. Because it wasn't just cancer, but you pile it on. It was cancer. It was like, okay, and the treatment's going to be horrible. And then on top of that, this treatment's going to cause you to never be able to have children.
Yeah.
So it was like bad news now, bad news for the immediate future, and bad news for the rest of my life.
Yes.
Like, so you're wearing the weight of that. You're feeling the anger of that. But somewhere in the process, you don't lose hope, and you keep your hope in God. How long do you think you walked angry with God and disappointed with everything? Like weeks, months, days?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Years?
I think looking back, so perspective, knowing who I am today, knowing the things that I was carrying that during that time, and like my family and I talked about this yesterday after
because your
the
entire
talk.
family was in
because my entire
church,
family
which
came.
is awesome.
Yeah, they took a red eye flight from Hawaii and showed up at 7 a.m. and then came straight to church. I didn't know that. I just found that out. Yeah, and they're not from Hawaii, but they were on vacation, and we were talking. And in the moment, my sister said this. She said, we are a family that just pushes through. We just push through. That's what we do, which is not bad. She goes, but sometimes after you push through, we have to be willing to stop and also look back. So what I can tell you is, like, in the moment, it actually felt pretty quick. That anger felt like it happened. I was mad. I went from making jokes and making light to kicking everyone out of my hospital room when the doctor gave us the news of how bad the cancer really was, to having that hour to be alone. I think they probably left me alone for about an hour, reading that scripture and then making this commitment. Okay, God, I'm going to, and I'm going to be okay. And then pushing through. Now, that's what it felt like.
Sure.
As I look back with perspective, I think the disappointment and disillusionment probably started the day I found out I was sick. But it didn't feel okay to say that out loud.
Yeah.
It didn't feel okay to be like, this isn't what it's supposed to be. I'm 16. I'm not supposed to have this. Because I was just doing what I knew to do. I knew that I have a God who heals, and he's going to heal me. So it doesn't matter. Those are my answers. So I didn't let myself feel, because that would have been lack of faith.
Yeah.
To feel would have been lack of faith. And so
it wouldn't have been reality.
It wouldn't have been in my mind.
Yeah.
Cause I think when I say things like, I knew how to do church, I think this was the first time that I actually had to live faith. live out true faith. And true faith doesn't come, it isn't just raising your hands at the right time, or it isn't those things. And so I was faced with the reality of what living a life in trusting Jesus with your whole life really means. And at 16, you're definitely not prepared for that.
Yeah, usually you're not facing something like that until you're older in life.
Yeah, and so I think looking back, probably from the day I was diagnosed all the way through until that moment, and even after that moment of reading the story of Naaman and feeling like that Jesus had said, "This is what I want you to think. I'm taking you into a dirty river, but it's got good on the other side." Even a little bit after, I was more of like, okay, but that's just not the way I was raised it was going to be. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to push through. And then it's taken me several years in retrospect. It's taken me several years to go like, oh, God really did have the best mapped out for me. I don't think God caused any of what happened to me.
No.
But I believe God had he worked it out for me.
That's a direct scripture you're quoting and you're referencing multiple times in your message yesterday, both by quoting it and both by insinuating that's what you're referencing. But it's God works all things together for the good.
For the good.
For the good. Not God causes and it's good no matter what. He works all situations for the good, for those who love him or called according to his purpose. Yeah. So what would you say to someone right now that is like, they're in a hard season? Mm-hmm. You know, after service yesterday, multiple people came to me and I prayed with people with things that they were going through. And there's people dealing with hard seasons. I think back to just some families we've been walking with over the last month who've felt significant and devastating loss in their life. Yeah. What would you say to the person who's going through a hard season? How would you encourage them not to lose hope in the difficult seasons?
Yeah. That was the scariest question. You and I talked before I spoke. And that question scares me. It's why I say not everything ends up with a pretty bow this side of eternity. Yeah. Like we don't always know. Number one thing I would say to someone before I'd even say don't lose hope, I would make sure they knew that God is big enough to handle their questions and their disappointment. I don't think I knew that about God. I don't think I recognized that about God.
You didn't realize you were allowed to ask God the hard questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that it was okay for me to be sad. It was okay for me to have some disillusionment because it's not supposed to be this way. So that's the first thing I would probably encourage them. Like, hey, God can handle the hard questions. He may not give the answers that we want at the timing we want, but he can handle it. And then I would also encourage them like that God sees, never leaves. There's a song that my wife and I listen to a lot, and it's called Alone in It. And I don't know if you've ever heard, it's a worship song, but the song makes a statement. It says, and again, I don't base my theology on the song, but it says,
hopefully the writer of the song used theology to write the keep going.
It says, God never promised that there won't be a mountain that stays, but he does promise he'll be with us along the way. And that there are going to be seasons and things that happen in our life that the hard doesn't go away. Paul lived with a thorn in his flesh. We don't know what that was, but he asked God to take it away 3 times and he never did.
Yep.
But God was with him every step of the way. He was never alone in it. And what I would say is this world is hard and it is horrible at times and it hurts bad. The hope is found in knowing that Jesus is with us. He will make good out of it. And he will never leave us as we go through it. That is what I cling to, because I've had other bad things happen since and before.
Yeah.
But I recognize that my God understands that. He walks with me and he will make good out of it at some point.
Yeah.
And so that's what I would probably share.
Let's jump into the Naaman story real quick.
Sure.
So you preached from the passage in 2 Kings 5, the story of Naaman. He was, just real quick, commander of the army of Aram and Aram, not Aram.
Either one.
Aram, Aram.
We're not
Aram.
sure.
He was the commander, but he also had leprosy or a skin disease that was contagious. And he gets sent to the nation of Israel from from his servant girl, his slave girl says, there's a prophet in Israel who can heal you. He gets there, rehashing the story quickly. The king of Israel thinks it's a setup that the king of Aram. I can't remember anymore. I said it so many times. Aram. But the king of Aram, that's what it is. Is setting him up to like prove why he's going to go take him over. He eventually goes to the prophet. Prophet says, go wash in the Jordan 7 times and you'll be cleansed. And Naaman is
angry,
furious at this
stalked
statement.
away is what they say.
So he's literally he's mad because he's like at one point it's like he stalked away, then he's angry because it's like there's better rivers in Damascus where I'm from. They would cleanse me better than your dirty river of the Jordan here. Like the reality of the thing is, and a couple things from that story that I find very interesting. One is that he had faith to pack up 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and something else. I can't remember what the third thing was. But there's almost 1,000 pounds worth of gifts that he's bringing, which means he had enough faith to pack that.
The rest was clothing, by the way.
Clothing, 10 articles of clothing. But he packs all that up and he transports that. I don't know how many donkeys it would take to transport 1,000 pounds. I'm sure somebody, but at least 2, but my assumption would be 4 or maybe 8. So he packs up the supplies. And then he travels from Damascus to Israel. And then there he seeks out the king, he seeks out the prophet. Like he's done a lot of work to get there. And then the prophet's like, go wash in the Jordan. Like he had all this believing that something was going to happen. That to me stands out. So it looks like he's a man who's like he knows it's about to go the way he wants it to go. He's ready for it. And then it doesn't go the way he wants it to go. Because now he's just got to go do this it's
not prestigious. He had to do something that was not prestigious. He was you can't say Naaman didn't have some pride.
Oh, no. He
knew who he was.
Yeah, he was a big deal, especially in his country. And with his people. And he was loved. We know he was loved because the way his men around him spoke to him afterwards. But the flashy thing, it didn't work out. It wasn't a flashy miracle. It actually reminded me of a story of a friend of mine years ago, probably 2016, 17, somewhere in that time frame. My friend was wanting to buy a new house. And the long story short is he found this house and he was like, all right, God's going to give me a really good deal on this house. And he went through this list of things that God was going to show up in this miraculous way. But he didn't. It's a normal house at a normal price. There was no deal. He's like, I can't look at this and say God provided a miracle for me. This was like normal. It's like everyday story. And he was sort of like almost disappointed because he thought God was going to come through in this like really incredible way. And he's going to be able to share this testimony of faith with his friends and his coworkers and his colleagues. And it was just a normal story. And it was a struggle for him. And what Naaman's dealing with is just a normal thing. The Jordan River is a normal river in the middle of Israel. And it was hard to have faith in that normalcy. And like you experienced, you're healed today through radiation, chemotherapy.
Smart doctors.
Smart doctors. And it's easy for someone to be on that side of it and be like, well, I thought it was going to be, this thing, and miss God in the story. And so you walk through, obviously, I don't know what it's like. I've never been through that kind of treatment before, but I can only imagine it was difficult, painful, and at times probably debilitating. But you stand here healed today. How do you help someone navigate when they think there's going to be like this really cool God story, but it turns out to be a quote unquote normal story? How do you still see God on this side of it? I know you said you felt God in the middle of it, but you give glory to God.
100%.
How can you help someone give glory to God? Like in a situation like Naaman, this was so simple and so basic. It shouldn't matter. I want a better story. How do you help someone give glory to God when it's not a quote unquote better story?
I said yesterday that understanding often is followed by obedience, and my obedience was Naaman had to be obedient and he had to do the Jordan, right? He had to go get in it. Mm-hmm. I just had to, my obedience was more not turning from God in it.
Yep.
And just to still walk with him. And I said, the understanding follows obedience. And I would say we tend to look at the how of our journey. Like, well, how did he do it? So, and I used to tell people, oh, God didn't heal me. That God didn't heal me. Doctors did. And he didn't do it that way for me. And some might say, well, yes, he did because he gave doctors knowledge. I'm like, okay, I get that. What I should say is there wasn't a miracle in that moment. Through the chemotherapy, the knowledge is miraculous, but it was not a miracle. And so, yeah, it can be disappointing if you're just looking for the how he does it. Instead, I look at the what he does through it. And so sometimes this is easier to do on the other side. Yeah. That understanding that is followed by the obedience. And what I would say to someone is, so maybe God didn't show up the way you want him to. The house is normal. The purchase was like, it was just, but what are all the things that God's doing as you're walking the journey with him? And I would encourage people in any struggle. Mine was physical. People have emotional. People have relational. They have financial. There's lots of struggles we face in this world. I would ask, so maybe God didn't give you the lottery, but he provided for you along the way. Mm-hmm. And that has really helped me as I've looked back and seen, and I think I said that yesterday, like I can show you lots of little miracles along the way that were not about my healing, but they were about someone else's transformation. Or they were not about my healing, but they were about something that took place relationally in my life because of the journey that God took me on to get to healing.
Yeah.
And I said that, and I think this is true even of Naaman. I wonder, would Naaman have turned around with all his officers and said, now I know there's no other God but the God of Israel? Would he have actually said that if he'd have just got what he wanted, which was a big wave of the hand?
It's funny that's what he wanted. I thought about that yesterday. It's like, I thought you would come out and wave your hand over me and I would be healed.
Yeah, I think because we have an idea of what it's going to look like.
I thought I would walk down to the altar at church and
heal me.
I thought I would XYZ, fill in the blanks. This is the way I expected it to happen.
And I wonder for me, had it been that way, would I have been grateful? Of course I'd have been grateful. I don't know. And I'm not saying that God allows us to go through all these things because he wants it to us to really feel it. I don't know if where I am today, I actually don't believe for me that where I am today would have been where I would have been had God just said, hey, all these tests came back and cancer's gone. I don't know. I do know I would have never talked to Mary. I would have never met her. Mm-hmm. I do know the odds of me speaking at a National Cancer Survivors conference would have never happened.
Yeah.
I do know I would have never traveled the circuit of speaking in high schools and speaking to 30,000 young people because they're not bringing the guy who had a miracle of a cancer diagnosis that suddenly went away. I wouldn't have had that, which would have never, then I would have never become a youth pastor. And I would have never been on this podcast today.
You do know that God turned a bad situation and used it for the good.
Yes. And so what I try to do today to answer that person is like, but he didn't do it the way I wanted, or it doesn't feel like a miracle. There are little miracles in everything that we walk through. Mm-hmm. And I would say, you'll see what you're looking for. So if you're looking for a miracle that looks supernatural in all intents and purposes, like the waving of the hand. It really reminds me of like the waving of a wand. But if you're looking for the magic in the mirror, and I'm not saying that God doesn't do that. I actually believe God does do that.
And geez, you're supposed to come to the altar and let the elders pray for you and anoint you with oil. And like, that's all biblical. It's not saying no to it, but just we understand the reality of life is that's not everyone's story. No. And that's not the way it goes for everyone. Yes. Sometimes it looks different. Yeah. Staying faithful with God in the middle of it, trusting God in the process. And you'll find even probably a lot. That would have been one great miracle for me.
but I can tell you hundreds of little miracles that happened for me and others because he did it this way.
Yeah. Your two boys are actual miracles.
I will never forget.
You might say there is no miracle in the healing of your body because it was doctor treatment. And yes, I'm not qualifying what you already qualified.
Yeah.
But you weren't supposed to have kids.
No, and the day that we found out that Lindsay was pregnant, and I come from a family of planners, and I called my dad and cried. And everyone's like, of course you cried. You weren't supposed to have children. Nope. I cried because I had a 5-year plan because we were going to do in vitro fertilization. And it was only 6 months into our marriage when we found out my wife was pregnant. And I said, Dad, I'm so sorry. And he's like, I'm sorry. You're sorry? Why are we sorry? Why are you sorry? And it was because I have a 5-year plan. He's like, you realize this is a miracle? And I was like, oh yeah. And then that second miracle came. And by the way, the doctors still tell me I can't have children. So I'm always like, this is Cameron, this is Connor, you are wrong. But yeah, God did miracles all along the way and has continued to do them.
Yeah. And you got great boys.
They're great.
Great. They're men.
They are men.
They're not boys. They're men.
Oh man. They are.
One of the things you mentioned yesterday, just maybe last
Sure.
point of reflection before we wrap up, is you mentioned that Naaman didn't understand the significance of the Jordan.
Yeah.
And, you know, as you were talking about, that's the river that the Israelites crossed when they took the promised land. I was thinking about the 12-stone memorial that was laid in the middle of the Jordan. I was thinking about when the Ark of the Covenant walked through, the Jordan stopped flowing.
Yes.
And it stopped flowing, and then the people walked through. Like, I was thinking about all those moments. And then I love how you were like, he not only didn't understand the significance of what the Jordan meant to the Israelite people and how it had been woven into the story of God's people for so long, he also didn't understand the significance of what it would be in the future.
Yes.
And I just thought that was a beautiful articulation of the significance of even moments. Mm-hmm. Like when he stepped into the Jordan River, he thought it was normal, but he did not know that God could take something quote unquote normal and create a place of significance in and through it.
Yeah.
And I think there's times in our own life that we look down at normal things. Like, oh, it's just normal. Yeah, I just have a normal testimony. I just have a normal marriage. I just have a normal, everything's normal. Like, it's not that big of a deal. But God, I truly believe, makes significant things from quote unquote normal things. Mm-hmm. And I also think that sometimes what we think is normal is not normal. But yeah, so Naaman steps into something, and he's stepping into the story of God's people. He is now declaring that the Lord God is his God.
Yes.
There is no other God. So everyone else is polytheistic. The nation of Israel is monotheistic.
Yes.
In the time frame we're talking about here, they were actually worshiping other gods as well, but not the prophet.
Right.
The prophet was saying there is one true God in Israel, and now Naaman steps in from a polytheistic mindset, realizing, no, there is one true God.
Yes.
One of the things I thought about is how many times did he go to his gods and ask them to heal him?
Well, that to me, there's little pieces I'm like, man, if I had more time, we would be going... You could do a series.
He had
on this,
to, right? He had to go to his gods.
Of course
and say,
he did. You can't tell. That's what they would have done.
Yeah, and he's sitting there, and they're like, and finally the slave girl's like, "Hey, there's a God in Israel. There's a prophet. He can heal you.
Yes.
Go." And Naaman, I imagine Naaman had to have some level of desperation.
Well, when all else, I've tried everything else.
Yeah,
that's what I would assume. Why? Again, in his country, they had lots of gods.
Yeah.
And the Bible doesn't say this happened, but you have to kind of be able to break it down and go, well, the king probably knew they had lots of gods, and they probably had exhausted their resources. So I guess we'll try this.
Yeah.
What they got to lose.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
So he came to our God.
Yeah. And he went to this, and God takes him to this normal river.
Yes.
That just flows through the region. Yeah. And in that very normal place, God brought a miraculous healing.
Yep.
And he gave credit for it.
Yeah.
I think for me, is like the question is, how do I see God in the normal? I wake up and I go to my job 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I sitting at the sideline of my kids' sports games. Mine's soccer, the only true sport. Shout out. Yours is rugby, obviously.
I was going to say, you might want to talk to my son Connor about that. He's a rugger.
But like, how do you find God in normal, everyday situations? Any encouragement you'd have around that?
Yeah, I said it earlier, and I mean, I think we always look at it just for salvation, but if you seek him, you're going to find him. That's a promise.
Yeah.
And so I think we'll find God when we're looking for him to show up.
Yeah.
I think oftentimes part of the problem is we walk through life thinking all of it's just normal. It's just a routine. When I was a cop, when I went through my academy, you have this thing called an A9, an Argus 9. And what it means is you did something wrong in the academy. That's what it means. And they'll say things like this: hey, I'm going to read about that in the morning, Nix, which means you just screwed up. So you're going to write a report about what you screwed up about. It's turned in on a piece of paper called an Argus 9. And so I got in trouble for something I did. I don't even remember what I did. Oh, it was during an inspection. That's right. It was an inspection in the morning. My pins were not in alignment, and I had to write a report about the importance of having your pins be in alignment and how your pins not being in alignment equal could affect your partners. Figure that one out. I still haven't. It's been a long time. In my Argus 9 that I wrote, I turned it in, and it started with, during a routine inspection, the officer noticed that my pins were out of alignment. I received my Argus 9 back saying, please rewrite this. So now I got in trouble for the thing I wrote, and I couldn't figure out why. So I went to my training officer and I asked, I want to rewrite this, sir. Can you give me some direction? He goes, yeah, look at it. Look at the first sentence and tell me why in the world I would never, like, he was angry, I would never accept this. I'm like, sir, there was an inspection. He goes, nope, you missed it. You said routine. Because there is nothing in law enforcement that is routine. And if you decide to look at it as routine, you're going to miss some of the most important parts of being a cop. He goes, and it's dangerous to see everything as just routine. There's nothing routine. I think that's how we find Jesus.
Yeah.
Because if we just go through life thinking, oh, it's just the same thing. I get up, I eat my breakfast, I go to work, I come home, I do my job, I do my widgets, whatever those things are, and I come home, then yeah, we won't see God in it. But if we go, oh, what does Jesus have for me today? What is he going to show me? His mercies are new every morning. What is he going to show me today? How can I experience him today? I think if you seek him, you're going to find him in your everyday, and your days will not be normal.
It reminds me of parenting. If your kids have ever, I know they have, mine have, maybe playing a video game, or Aria, my daughter, she's like coloring a page or something like that, and I will call out their name, and they do and say nothing.
Yes.
And then I have to like,
yes.
I'm like, hey, pay attention.
Yes.
And then like, oh, it's like I'm standing in the same room and they're distracted by this thing they're doing, and they forgot that I was in the room trying to like get their attention. And that's what you're saying is we do that with God. He is with us every day. And sometimes we just don't acknowledge or recognize he is there. But if you wake up today, and maybe you're listening to this podcast on the way to work, what's God going to do in your life today, through your life today? What's God going to speak to other people through your life today? Like, treat today like God wants to use your life in a powerful way to bring him glory and to bring good to other people's life today. Like, that's like think about that on day to day. And then nothing ever becomes normal. You have a routine and a rhythm that you're walking life through, but normal is God is going to move, and I'm going to expect God to do something today. Whether it's I'm going to learn something, I am going to share my faith with somebody, I'm going to be generous and kind to someone, I'm going to be patient, I'm going to try something I've never tried before. Like treat every day like it's a gift from God, because it is.
Yes.
Every day is a gift from God. And believe that he's in the middle of it. I think there's so much wisdom in that. And thanks for the transparency and the sharing and the message yesterday. And we'll are you going to do part 2 the next time you preach? Or
it won't be naming, but yes. So,
okay, beautiful.
So we're going to talk about that 4.5 years ago.
Yeah. Nice. So that'll be coming in a couple months.
Couple years.
Couple months, unless you pivot and want to preach something else. But yeah, so thanks though. appreciate your thoughts, your gift, and all that you do here, man.
Love it.
And thank you guys for tuning in for another episode of Digging Deeper. Have a great week, and we'll see you on here next time.